I sometimes think that the easiest era of King Crimson to get into is I guess what Martin Popoff has affectionately referred to as the red, blue, and yellow era. Discipline, Beat, and Free the Perfect Pair. We all know how much Discipline is, this accessible, brilliant album. Everyone adores it now. It's almost a bandwagon at this point. You have all these music magazines coming out going, hey guys, let us be the ones to tell you that Discipline's a great album, don't. It's just like a lot of people were championing it on the internet in the years prior to this in the 21st century, and of course there were fans in back in the day. But I suppose those magazines still want to be the tastemakers, the gatekeepers, if you will. But whatever. Beat is an album which is poppier even than Discipline. And I think this puts off some of the old Crimson fans. I think Robert Fripp was a bit upset by how Beat turned out. Adrian Belew perhaps had too much influence, as did producer Rhett Davies possibly, who was removed from Free the Perfect Pair. Rhett Davies was, and Fripp seems to have... What is amazing to me about Free the Perfect Pair is, and I think partly because of the inclusion of a Larks, Tongues and Aspic Part 3 on this album as the final track, but it's almost as though Fripp wanted to realize a successor to what I call the angry trilogy of King Crimson, which is Larks, Tongues and Aspic, Stars and Bible Black, and Red. Free the Perfect Pair feels like a true successor to this era in a way that Discipline was a reinvention of that, of King Crimson entirely, almost like an entirely new band that just happened to be called King Crimson for the convenience of commerciality, say. And then Beat was essentially Fripp realizing that, this is King Crimson now, and I kind of want to do a King Crimson album again. So Free the Perfect Pair is delivered. It features the infectious, catchy bass lines of Tony Levin and his Chapman stick from Discipline and from Beat. It features the bewildering and just mind-boggling drumming of Bill Bruford, which Bill Bruford is so precise, and yet Bill Bruford could never be replicated by a machine. It's so human, and it's beautifully sloppy in its own way. It's rock drumming in its own way. Well, he does his Earthworks projects, Bruford, which is more in line with traditional jazz, you could say. I'm actually not as... that's my impression of it. Maybe someone who listens to more of Earthworks would dispute that, to be fair. I'm not as exposed to it as one could be. And then Belew's presence, his vocal tracks are probably... maybe they're not more impressive than some of the best on Beat. But he does a great job here. And what we have in compositionally, we have tracks which are among the best of the catchy sort of upbeat new wave tracks like Heartbeat on Beat, and then you have the phenomenal experimental, somewhat proto-industrial, but industrial was around at this time, these strange noise experiments which almost is they're these interesting noise experiments like on the Angry trilogy, and they have the catchy bounce of the Tony Levin. I love this idea that King Crimson was mutated from an inspiration from Talking Heads and other kind of New York no-wave mutant disco acts. That's coming out in Crimson a little bit as well, I feel. Tony Levin's from this. Well, Tony Levin originates from what has been called by that chat. What's his name? Ralph something from the Contrarians, who's delivered some phenomenal videos on Peter Gabriel's Scratch, Pink Floyd, The Final Cut, and Pete Townshend's fantastic album called All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. Forgive the unpolitically correct title. It's just, it was what it was, unfortunately. But yeah, he referred to Peter Gabriel 2 as the New York punk Peter Gabriel album, and Tony Levin's on that, delivering some of the finest. Well, that song White Shadow was one of the greatest things of all time, and the Robert Fripp solo on there is... I've told a story about that before. Go listen to it in the... I think it's in the Larks, Tongues and Aspic video. My favourite King Crimson album, one of my favourite albums ever. Anyway, I'm waffling on. My proposition is twofold. On the one hand, King Crimson fans, give another listen to Free the Perfect Pair. This is one of the very best albums in the group studio discography. For those who are not fans of King Crimson, because let's say you consider yourself a music snob, but for whatever reason, for some reason, 1970s progressive rock you're not given permission to like, because too much effort was put into that, and they don't come across as, they don't make you feel as good about being apathetic, fashionably apathetic and all of that. Well, but the 80s stuff, you kind of like the 80s stuff. It's kind of retro and cool now. Well, you like that. You're willing to like 1980s music. You've opened the door to Discipline, perhaps. Well, try on Free the Perfect Pair. You may be able to appreciate some progressive rock without feeling like you're a square or whatever you seem to feel. I tend to think of those who can't get into progressive rock as being, you know, squares. It's like, oh, you know, all rock music needs to be about Triple M beer and cigarettes and girls and all of that. It's like, okay, you know, I like both. They're fine. All, you know, the kind of the post Sex Pistols, John Lydon crowd. It's like, oh, you know, it's like music needs to sound like, you know, it could have been made by anyone, and that not much effort was put into it. And it's like, I mean, there's effort in creative songwriting. I mean, I think that gets perhaps taken for granted by those who like a lot of the music of the punk era onwards, how good a lot of the actual songwriting was, rather than just the, you know, this is the fundamental apathy and indifference of it all. And this isn't and this is something that's not appreciated by those who disdain punk as well, to be in the new wave era onwards, to be fair. But for the perfect pair, if you're tired of In the Court of the Crimson King, if you feel like you've exhausted the Angry trilogy a bit too much, you know, like songs in Aspic Red or even Stylus and Bible Black, Discipline you're kind of done with, and you've maybe decided to get into Beat as a result because you're tired of Discipline, but you never really bothered to Free the Perfect Pair as much, just because maybe you hear the title track and you're just like, all right, you kind of get the idea of the album. But this is one of the most varied and interesting of the King Crimson albums. You have tracks like from Stylus and Bible Black, and you have tracks like from Beat. Few King Crimson albums have that level of variety, to be fair.